Hey, everybody, and welcome to Notes from the Other Side. This is a podcast for people who love Jesus but have some real concerns about Christianity. Here at Notes, we take a microscope to some of Christianity's thornier topics and people using a progressive theological lens and a socio-historical approach to studying the Bible. So if that sounds like your jam, come on in and have a seat. But buckle up, it might get bumpy. All right, everybody, welcome back to Notes from the Other Side. This is a podcast where we take a microscope to some of Christianity's thornier topics and people. I'm your host, Tiziana Mom So Hard Severse. And in the studio with me today is Rick, the Podfather Welch.
How are you? How are you momming so hard?
I don't know what time it is. I don't know. Listen, I don't know what time it is, right? Like, it's like not dinner time and it's not breakfast. It's somewhere in that weird in between. When you've got little kids, I don't know. The one's napping and the other one's in school. That's all I know. Just trying to get my head on straight.
So you know, my fit today is Giraffe Studio.
Yeah. If you're a Patreon subscriber from Notes from the Other Side, you'll be able to watch this video over that away. Otherwise, you're listening via however you listen to your podcasts. But yeah, you get to see Rick's sexy shirt. We actually don't have Andy in the studio with us today. We're recording virtually. But he actually texted me today and said he's bummed he couldn't come because he wanted to hear the second part of the story. Because if you've been listening to the show, we had a very special guest last episode, and we have invited that very special guest back to finish telling us her testimony. Welcome back to the studio, my mom. Hi, Mom.
I'm glad to be here.
Kelly Haines. For those of you that didn't listen to the previous episode, get out of here and go listen to it. But just to recap, my mom is a nurse practitioner on the Navajo Nation, and she was telling us a lot about her life and her life story last time, which included getting pregnant at 13 and the trials and tribulations of being a young lady pregnant, trying to figure out how to go to school, trying to figure out how to raise her boy, trying to figure out how to keep her boy in a world that consistently wanted her to get rid of that boy. And so now here we are, all these years later, and that's my oldest brother, Dennis. And where we left off the story, you, after a 20-year separation, had gotten married to that young boy's father after he had a miraculous experience with Jesus Christ and became a Christian.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would have never imagined that I would marry my boyfriend. Our son was 17 when we got married.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you had traveled your own ways after high school, and he'd gotten married and had some kids, and you'd gotten married and had some kids, and his wife sadly passed away from a drug overdose, and my dad's gay, so that probably wasn't the best marriage for you. But here we are now. And when we left off, we talked about how going from 4 kids to 9 kids, 3 of whom had, fetal alcohol effect and other issues from being exposed in utero to the teratogens that their mom was using. That was a pretty big shift in your life, and it took a toll on your mental health. Had you had struggles with your mental health prior to that experience?
No, I had not had any depression. I mean, high school stuff, but nothing that was serious. I never had to take medications. Mm-hmm. When we first got married, we had all the children at home, and the youngest was 18 months. The oldest was, I think Victor was 14 or 15. Mm-hmm. And my husband at the time worked in Alaska, so he was only home during the winter for a few weeks and then occasionally a break here and there. And he made good money, but it was kind of, to be thrown into a stay-at-home mom with 9 children, it was not as easy as working. It was a lot of laundry. That was the worst of it, the laundry. I mean, meals, you could just make a double batch of food, add salad and bread, good enough. But that laundry, if you missed one day of laundry, you were in big trouble.
It's so funny because, like, hearing you say that now, I'm an adult and I'm a stay-at-home mom. After, like you had a career prior to that. You were a hairdresser like I was, and you owned a salon like I did. And so you went from that. Yeah. Apples don't fall far from trees, ladies and gentlemen. But you went from that, career woman, to being the stay-at-home mom with all of these kids. I tell you what, I did 4 loads of laundry yesterday, and it's just me and Dylan and the 2 girls.
Yeah.
That's just 4 people. So it was emotional, and you had struggled to find support or help with the kids, especially the 3 youngest ones that weren't in school yet, because their behavioral challenges were pretty extraordinary.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can tell you a story. One time, I mean, just going to the bathroom was a luxury because you'd be by yourself for a few minutes. And they were real quiet. And I came out and they had taken a pair of pantyhose and put an open cup of grape yogurt in it and was swinging it around and like finger painting the walls with these big globs I mean, how would they even think it's doing something like that? There was yogurt all over every wall, on my carpet, on my furniture, and they really didn't know they were doing something bad, so I couldn't even get them in trouble. I just had to clean up the mess.
Yeah.
So they were pretty busy.
Yeah. And Glenn was like 4 or 5.
He was 5. He'd gone into kindergarten that year.
Yeah. That's just, and I remember we were all smashed into this house that had an upstairs and a downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that some pieces of that, So
yeah, we had
really
to put a
interesting
lock on the basement door because the kids would go down there and get into everybody's things. I mean, they were just busy. They weren't like malicious, but they would just do things. Like one time, the neighbor had grown this huge fuchsia, and every year she had a hanging basket of fuchsias that would win prizes at the county fair.
Mm-hmm.
And Mary Rose in Georgia took styrofoam cups, stripped all the buds off the tree, off of it, so there was stripped to like just nothing, and then came in, knocked on her door, and presented her these cups full of fuchsia buds, thinking they were giving her a surprise, when in reality they just stripped her whole, dreams of being in the county fair with this beautiful fuchsia that she nurtured for like a year. It was like,
Well, and so what was your relationship with God like at this point? And you now had a husband that loved the Lord, which was new for you, and you guys got all these kids, and you're kind of trying to co-parent these kids. What did that look like?
Well, for the first year and a half, we couldn't really go to church because we needed 2 vehicles to get anywhere, and we didn't have a big enough vehicle. So after about maybe about 18 months into the marriage, we got a van. And it was a big blue Ford van, had 3 back bench seats. So we got to be in a position where we could go in one vehicle. And we started going to a little Calvary chapel in Sequim. And of course, I was by myself, but I really thought the children needed to learn about Jesus and go to Sunday school and all of that. So we went to a Calvary Chapel church for about 3 years. And they had a small youth group for the kids, and they had Sunday school. But I was sort of an outsider. I didn't ever really, for some reason, it didn't click for me. And they weren't really helpful. Like if I asked it for like babysitting or anything like that, I really didn't find any support through the church. And I was being overwhelmed, and I needed some time to just be by myself occasionally. And so my husband said, well, why don't you take the kids to the daycare? There was a new daycare that opened on the corner, and I thought, I could just take the little kids maybe a couple hours a week to the daycare. So I had Glenn, Mary Rose in Georgia, and they were at that time maybe 3, 4, and maybe 6. So after school, I would take them to the daycare for a couple of hours, and they only had them for a month, and they got fired because they were too busy for the lady to take care of. So I couldn't even find a daycare that would help me. I was stuck with these kids. So we just dealt with it. I mean, we had big kids, middle kids, and little kids, and everybody had a partner. So maybe you would have Glenn, or maybe Brooke would have, usually Brooke took Glenn because she could handle him. But we would have to just make sure they were monitored and keep them busy, playing outside, doing things to keep them physically active. But it is pretty rough when you're by yourself.
Yeah. And then your dad died, and you went to the doctor, and this is the backdrop of it all. You've got all of this going on in your life. The kinds of things that we know and understand now are just the kinds of things that overwhelm parents, which is, why funding 0 to 3 Head Start programs, or like finding affordable childcare options is so important. It's not just, oh, you need to go to work. It's also like your mental health,
Yeah.
and you didn't have any of that. So you've got all the normal overwhelming of that. And then now you're.
Well, it was, my mom had come to live with us, so that took a little stress off. And my husband had, this is a whole nother story. The job in Alaska fell through, so he ended up coming home and was going to college for retraining. And during that time, around that, I was around November, because it was always clear, it was around Thanksgiving. My dad passed away, and I fell into a depression because I really loved him, and it was kind of a heartbreaking situation. And so I went to my physician, and he put me on a drug called Effexor, which was kind of like a mood brightener. And as I was on this medication, I started having anxiety and some problems. And every time I would go back to him, he would just increase the dose. He didn't really understand what was happening. And as he increased the dose of this medication, I started getting more and more agitated. I was having less sleep. And I started feeling like I needed to teach. I started getting like hyper religious. And I started needing to teach the kids about God. And at this time, we had switched to a different church by that time. We were going to a church that we'd gone to for the rest of our marriage. What was the name of that church again? I can't remember. It was Charlie or Joanna's dad's church.
Gardner Country Chapel.
Yeah, Gardner Country Chapel. Anyway, we had gone there, and it was just crazy. I mean, I thought the first thing that happened, I remember that kind of showed I was a little psychotic. I remember looking out the window and seeing that the pine needles on the street were accumulating, and I felt it was my duty to make sure every pine needle was off the street. So I was out there with a broom and a air compressor trying to blow every single needle off the street. And then I started feeling like God was calling me to be a preacher to the children in the garbage dumps at the Philippines. And so I started selling things so I could buy a ticket. And I remember your dad said, "Honey, why would the Lord call you to be a preacher to the children in the garbage dumps in the Philippines? We have our own children here that need you." It was like,
Yeah.
I was out of it, psychotic. I started thinking that people were going to kill me. I started thinking that they were listening on the phone when I would talk. So I tried to talk in code. I mean, but I didn't realize I was having psychotic issues, because on the inside looking out, it was normal. But on the outside looking at me, people were thinking, what is wrong with her? Is she drinking? Is she on drugs? What is she acting like this? And it was getting steadily worse, to the point where I finally, one day, just got in the car. I was in my pajamas and barefoot, and I drove away to Yakima to stay with my cousin. And I told him that Bucky was trying to kill me. My husband was trying to kill me. And it was just like, it was just crazy. And when I was down there, I had forgotten my drugs, and I went into withdrawals from Effexor. And so they took me to the hospital, and I told them, I'm on Effexor. They gave me some more medication. So my psychosis continued. I mean, it was just like the worst thing ever, and they know now when you're on that kind of medication, you're supposed to be on a mood stabilizer so that you don't get these high bipolar psychotic episodes. But of course, back then it was a brand new drug, and my doctor was just giving me samples. It was just a lot of it I don't even remember. My whole mind was wiped out for that whole summer. So you figure I started in November after my dad died, around Thanksgiving. By 4th of July, I was gone. It was just, and my poor kids, they didn't know what was going on. They ended up getting sent to family members, and it was so dangerous that they took the little kids and put them in foster care. Remember that? That was,
Yeah.
it was just,
I remember. I
Mhm.
remember, and I've said this before, but I remember when I first called you and told you that I needed to go to, that I thought I was going to start therapy. I was like in my 30s. I was like, I think I want to go to therapy. And you said, oh my God, you should. You probably have PTSD. I was horrible. And that's like that was what you said to me, which was like, it's a funny thing to say, but one of the things we understand now about the brain and about recovering from trauma of any kind, right? Especially like the sexual trauma you experienced as a child, the process and the speed with which an individual is able to come back from all of that isn't necessarily based on the severity or the longevity of the trauma and the experience, but on whether or not someone stepped in when they told.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, and so when a loved one is able to come alongside you and say, "No, I see that. I'm going to help you." Right? That is a direct correlation to the outcome of that person's therapy. Right? So it meant a lot to me when I said that to you, and you're like, "Oh yeah, you should." I remember one time, one of the saddest, hardest memories. And it's funny for me now because I know you and I understand the situation. And I just am capable now of seeing the hand of Jesus Christ in absolutely every last piece of this for me and for you, right? I remember you came downstairs because it was like 10 o'clock at night and you were like, "We got to clean the house. Everything's got to get clean. You guys got to get up and clean your rooms." Do you remember that? Yeah.
No,
And it was
there's a whole part of my mind at that time that just doesn't, I remember a few things.
Yeah. Yeah. But you were just in this total crazy place. And you were like, everybody has to get up and pulling things out of the dressers and doing the whole big thing. And there was a lot of yelling and crying and, it was just from room to room. And even hearing you say you thought you had to sweep up all of the pine needles.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, the compassion that I can have at this point on what you were going through to come downstairs and do that. You had no idea. You had no control of your own mind. But that moment was one of the 2 or 3 really deep personal experiences that I have had with Jesus, because I remember all of a sudden my room was just flooded with the Holy Spirit. And Jesus was like, "It's okay. Let's go lay down. Let's just go to bed." And I'm just so
sorry to interrupt you, but I was curious about when you're in those states of psychosis, where is Jesus at that point?
Mm-hmm.
In your mind? What's going on in your mind? Is he there? Are you aware?
Well, I must have been aware because I was living in the Bible, looking in the Bible. The Bible was kind of like my anchor. And so I kind of used that. But as far as praying, I'm sure I prayed, but I don't know if I could hear him. It's almost like the drug floods your brain so you cannot really hear the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, I have a family member that believed that he was Jesus. And then about 3 months later, he believed that he was the Antichrist. And then they did a sleep apnea test and discovered that he was waking up 37 times an hour. And so he was sleep deprived and his mind was doing all this, but it's like his faith was such an important part of who he was that when his mind started to, degrade because of this lack of sleep, that the way that it funneled in his mind was that he was one or the other, the polar opposite. He was either the Christ or he was the Antichrist. And, it bothers me whenever people are like, "Oh, you're crazy." It was like, well, he wasn't crazy. He was sleep deprived is what he was. Mm-hmm. But then I also know other people. My mom worked with NAMI in mental health. Yeah. And it's a terrifying thought. And now she has Parkinson's and she's actually having hallucinations and things now. And so it's a terrifying thing because she said to me, "I'm aware, but are you aware of that little black boy that's standing there in the corner?" And I'm like, "No, there's no little boy there." Now, fast forward 5 years, if she sees him, we just say, okay. We don't say he's not there because it was upsetting her so much. It just seems to be the thing. But the brain is so weird when it comes to our faith. It's one of those things I've always been fascinated by, but I hope I never have to endure what you did. I can't imagine. I can't imagine that.
Well, in his mercy, I don't have a lot of it in my memory. So that's one thing that's been nice. I just remember things like putting my hair up in a ponytail on top of my head, wearing a outfit that I thought looked really cool because I sewed it myself. It was sort of this sherbet blend of light colors. Then it looked like, I don't know, I felt like looking back, I'm sure I've looked like horrible. I mean, so stupid. I had a big, huge black bag that had great yellow flowers on it. I thought I looked great, had tons of makeup on. That's a manic phase.
Yeah.
And my husband finally found a doctor to do a diagnosis, took me to Seattle. And I walked in wearing that outfit thinking I looked great. She took one look at me and says, "Oh, she's bipolar. Let's get into this." She
Wow.
sat me down and
Oh
says, "Oh,"
my
and I mean,
gosh.
pressured speech and not being able to sit still and very agitated and, grandiose thoughts and all these things that really point to, I wasn't hallucinating though. And I didn't hear voices or anything, but it's just, I was out to lunch.
What
Wow.
happened at that meeting then?
She wanted me to get off of Fexer. So what she did was she didn't want me on any other drugs that were prescribed, or that were prescription drugs. So she gave me kind of a time frame to titrate off of the Effexor, and I used Benadryl to offset the side effects of the withdrawals. And I
Wow.
slept a lot. I remember I slept and slept and slept.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing I
I
wanted to
remember
eat was
that too.
crackers and candy
With
bars.
butter on the unsalted side
Yeah, it was crazy. But
and
then she
outrageous
hooked me
bars.
up with a psychiatrist that did the chemical work, and the psychiatrist hooked me up with a psychologist that did my mental health, for counseling and how to get my life back together. So between my psychiatrist and my psychologist, I had about, probably 4 years of counseling. And maybe I think altogether I went for 8 years, but I was only on medication for about 4 years. And I had to have medication to allow my brain to heal.
Mm-hmm.
And then after I was off the medication, my doctor said, "Well, chances are you will never have another psychotic break. But if you ever have to go on any antibiotics, or any antidepressants, you are going to have a mood stabilizer."
Mm-hmm.
So, and I
Hmm.
haven't had any problems since. And when your dad passed away at that time, I was still going to some amount of counseling. And he said, "If you haven't had a manic phase going through, your husband's death, don't worry about it. You're okay."
Yeah.
So, but it was a
Wow.
long journey back.
What did you learn, from that counseling and the proper meds? Because like the arc of your whole life, has been this total struggle and triumph to overcome all of these like Herculean odds kind of stacked against you. And then this final situation with the Effexor, it's like you were just like almost ground zero,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and it's
Well, I
almost like
know
you had to
one thing
rebuild
that was
yourself.
a real benefit was when I was on my medication and kind of getting my health back. I realized that my whole life, I never had breaks to stop my thinking. I didn't have it was usually thought would come into my head and I just blurted out whatever. I had some problems with that. So I realized I really have a ADD, attention deficit disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And the medication and the training that I had with my psychologist kind of taught me how to stop and think before you talk. How much energy does this situation really take? Do you need to blow up right now, or can you take a couple breaths and look at the situation and see how much energy you need to put into this? I learned to sort of curtail how many tasks I would take on, because I was always one to volunteer. "Oh yeah, we
Mm-hmm.
could help. I'll help with 4-H. I'll help with,
Mm-hmm.
after school activities. I'll do this. I'll
Mm-hmm.
do that." Well, when you have 9 kids, you really can't do all that, even though you might want to. So I learned to be a little more selective about how I could help. And I learned a lot about volunteering to help other people with mental health issues. I mean, we had some really good, we ended up developing some programs for grief counseling for widows, and I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
but through that whole journey with my psychiatrist and my psychologist, it really did a lot about. They taught me about childcare, how to talk to children in a way that you could teach them without making them feel bad. I mean, there was just a lot of things that was incorporated into how I am now, and it really
Yeah.
actually helped me with my job as a nurse practitioner as well later in life.
Yeah.
But those first few years, I couldn't believe that I could watch a movie and follow the whole plot, because my brain was slowed down a little bit. That I could read a
Mm.
newspaper and realize, oh gosh, I understand what I'm reading and I remember what I'm reading. It was amazing to be able to see how the brain is supposed to work you know. So that was part of what my development was when I went through my kind of my retraining on my medication and my counseling.
And how did you, I mean, was there any breaks in your relationship with God? Was there ever a time where you were just like mad at him that you'd had to go through this? Or did you feel like, what was that piece like for you during this recovery
Well,
process?
after I was off the Effexor, and then they started me slowly titrating on other medications to balance my brain, the Holy Spirit was there, right there,
Mm.
and I had that relationship kind of restored. I mean, he never left me, but he was kind of behind me on my shoulder. It felt like,
Mm-hmm.
he was. Anytime I talked in my prayers to him, he was there. So my relationship really came back in full force. And so when I didn't want to go to counseling or I got angry and didn't thought, why would this happen to me? I really felt soothed by the Holy Spirit that there was an outcome. And so I really clung to that verse, all things work for good
Mm-hmm.
for those that love the
Mm-hmm.
Lord. That was one of my one. And then the other one was, I've come that you would have life and have it more abundantly. And I would say, you said that. So I'm claiming that one. I want my life
Yeah.
to be more abundant.
Yeah.
And, it really did. As things developed, my relationship with my kids improved.
Mm-hmm.
My ability to be effective when I was on like a committee at school or something for the kids. My ability to understand why their little brains were broken. Because the three little kids, even through junior high and high school, were very challenging. And
Yeah.
so my ability to use, logic and redirect them and keep them busy and sports and activities and stuff, it really was amazing. The difference between my parenting skills with the last group as it was to the older and middle group of my kids. I
Mm-hmm.
think it just made a big difference. It was very
Yeah.
healthy. And the Lord was right there. Especially he would bring people into my life. I mean, right when I was in a crisis, maybe something would come up and, like when my grandma was older and she needed to go in a nursing home, I needed help. Just he would bring people into my life to help. Never let me down. And I could look back and see where even the crisis that I went through with my mental health is now being used for good, because now, I'm going back to school to get my degree in psychology. And
Mm-hmm.
so, uh,
Yeah. And you have found, yeah. So you've been able to like mine your own personal experience, because all things work together for good to those who are in Christ
yeah.
Jesus. It's one of those things. Like I don't know that God makes bad things happen to us, because I think we are free agents in the
Mhm.
world, and we do what we want to with the God nature that is in each and every one of us. And sometimes we use that to cause harm. But it's like God in His infinite mercy and wisdom is right there alongside of it, like picking up each and every piece and weaving it right
Mhm.
into the fabric in a way that makes it beautiful. You know.
Well, I know for me, when I was at the very worst of my psychosis and had been taken off the Effexor and was at rock bottom and kind of having to rebuild my brain and be able to think, I remember crying out to the Lord, just saying, I really need you to help me. And within a few days, that's when I met my psychiatrist. I had the best psychologist. I worked with her for probably like about 8 years. And
Mm-hmm.
I knew it was a direct answer to my plea. So he
Yeah.
listens all the time.
Yeah. Well, and now, because you said you're in school, so you ended up going back to school once all the kids were grown up and you are now an empty nester. You
Yeah,
started
my
like
husband
the
had passed
third.
away and I needed to get a job. And so I thought, well, I'll go up to Peninsula College and see. I could have went back to hairdressing, but I would have had to cut my hair, dye my hair, lose some weight, wear the nails, all the makeup. And I just didn't want to do
Yeah.
that. So I went up to Peninsula College.
Preach.
Yep. And they took me, they had a aptitude test you could take to see where your strengths lied and where your interests lied. And so I took this test online, and it came out I could either be a bartender, a hairdresser, or a nurse. Those were my top three. And I thought, okay. So I didn't want to be a bartender, and I'd already been a hairdresser. So I looked into the program, and they had an MA program. And in 1 year, you could become a certified medical assistant, and they made decent money. And it was in the medical field. I thought, oh, okay, that's great. So I took and it was just crazy because I really felt drawn to this class. So I took the first quarter, and I was going to sign up for my second quarter, and my advisor said, I'm not signing you up for the second quarter. And I thought, what? What do you mean? She goes, no, you need to be a nurse. You're too good to be an MA. You need to be in the nursing program. We need nurses, and there's a program, and you need to be in this program. And I said, well, gosh, I have to think about that. So I came home and I thought, man, that's like a 4-year commitment. I don't know if I want to do that or not. And I thought, well, and I talked with a friend, and they had said, well, 4 years is going to go by whether or not you're in school. And in 4 years, you're going to look back and think, if you had started when you were supposed to, you'd be able to say you're a nurse and you'd be through the program by now. And I thought, well, that's true. So I went up to talk to the nursing advisor, and she said, well, we can get you in the nursing program, but right now it's full. You'd have to wait for a year to get into the pre-nursing program. Let's see what kind of credits you have on because I had gone to Peninsula College for 1 quarter in 1975, and this is like 2005.
Yeah, and you talked about that on the last episode about how
and so I all of my records had been archived, and so the lady said, "Oh, you were in so long ago that your records are archived. Let me go over to the library and get your information and see what we can, if there's anything that we can use from your previous attendance." And so I'm sitting there waiting. She's probably gone 10 minutes, and she came back and she said, well, we can, do your biology, your English, there's certain ones that could transfer over. So it would have gotten me through that first quarter that I had missed when I was in the MA program. And she looked on her roster and she goes, you aren't going to believe this. We've just had 3 people that pulled out of the program. I don't normally do this because we have people on the wait list, but if you'd like to get in, I'd love to put you in right now. This looks like you'd be a good fit. So within 5 minutes of her coming back, I was enrolled in the pre-nursing program. So then I said, well, I don't know about funding. What am I supposed to do for funding? She goes, well, let me look into this. Well, there was a program through the unemployment office for people that were re-entering the working field that were new widows. And just luckily, your Aunt Lisa worked down at the unemployment
That's
office.
my Aunt Lisa, everybody.
Yes, yes. And so I thought, well, I'll go with my sister-in-law. So I went down there to talk to her. She was like one of the managers. So she pulled strings, got me money. And within half an hour, I had money for books, a book bag. I had a travel voucher for gas. And I had my first 2 semesters paid for.
Wow.
So I was in the nursing program. And I know
amazing.
The Lord pulled strings for me because you don't normally get into that. Yeah. So I was in the pre-nursing program. I was already caught up to speed with my first quarter. I wasn't even behind everybody. And I was in the nursing program like that without a penny out of my pocket and my gas paid for.
That sounds like God.
Oh, that was the Lord. Totally the Lord. It was amazing. Yeah.
Wow. Your life has had so many chapters, from being this young girl, raising a little boy all by yourself. And then you had this thriving career as a salon owner, and then just lost all of that to be a stay-at-home mom with all these kids and all that pressure and all this, and then to go down to the depths of hell with your own mental health and back. And then it's like, how old were you when this happened, when you got into this program?
In the nursing program? I was 48.
48 years old. Brand new life at 48 years old. Yeah. And without your husband, probably for the first time in however your whole life that you were like, without a man.
I knew your dad since I was in the 5th grade.
Yeah.
And so we'd been together, other than 11 years when we were married to other people, we always stayed in touch during that time because of course we had our son. But yeah, that was the first time I'd ever been all alone, when he passed away.
What was that like?
Well, it was when we were hospicing. Well, he started out with a cold. We thought he had a bad cold. So he got a course of antibiotics. Didn't clear up. So they gave him another course of antibiotics and told him, if this doesn't clear it up, we need to do an x-ray. So he came home from work and we ran down there and he got his x-ray done. And he was at work the next day and the nurse called and said, your husband and you need to come in this evening. It's important. So he got off work. The doctor waited for us and he said, I'm sorry to tell you this, but you are full of lung cancer. I mean, it's bad. So he got us into a pulmonologist, which we saw in 2 days. And the pulmonologist was looking at us and saying, well, this is very bad. This is a kind of adenocarcinoma that starts on the peripheral outside edges of your lungs. And then as it moves in, by the time you're symptomatic, it's pretty much invaded every part of your lungs fields. And you might have, 4 to 6 months to live. And we said, what? And he says, yeah, I would say about 4 to 6 months to live. And your dad looked at me and says, well, I guess you're going to have to start calling me John Wayne, because John Wayne died of lung cancer. And I said, oh, honey. And the lady that was talking with us said, this is no laughing matter, you guys. This is very serious. But we didn't know, I think, how else to
You
take
couldn't
that
process
time.
it.
Yeah,
Like it just come out of nowhere. To go from I have a cold with need some antibiotics to know you've got
you're going to be
6
dead
months to
before you
live.
know it. Yeah, it was pretty
Yeah.
sad. And so I was really angry with the Lord. I mean, I was really angry with the Lord. And I remember your dad was in bed one time when I was in the little office, and I was complaining, saying, this is just BS, Lord. I mean, I cussed.
Yeah.
I was so mad. And I said, how can you do this to me? How can you do this to me? This is horrible. After everything finally is getting better, we're finally getting ahead. The kids are doing well. And now you're going to kill him. This is horrible. And I remember the Lord said in my heart, it's not happening to you. He's the one that's dying. And all of a sudden my attitude was like, oh, you're right. I need to stop focusing on myself and focusing on him so that he could, And I remember I was in the office crying, and the phone rang, and it was a guy calling wanted money contributions to the cancer fund. They were just doing their fundraiser. It's this young man on the phone. So I just was so angry, and I said, you know what? If you really want to do something, don't ask for money. Maybe you could pray for me or something, because my husband's in the next room dying of lung cancer. And the guy said, oh, ma'am, I'd love to pray for you. I'm in seminary. I'll pray for you right now, ma'am. And this kid said the best prayer ever. It was like the Lord was saying, I'm here. Don't worry. Don't freak out. And this kid gave me the best prayer ever. And I said, oh, thank you. I'll give you $10. I'm so sorry. But it was
prayer works, folks. Prayer works.
And another time I was backing out of the driveway, and I was being very depressed, because the time was getting to the close, and I was, putting on my seatbelt, and I happened to glance over, and at the bottom of my mailbox, there was some primroses that were peeking out, and they had been planted last year, and somehow they bloomed lately, late in the year. They were just beautiful, these purples and pinks with the green leaves. I looked down there, and I really felt like the Lord was giving me some flowers to make me feel better. I know it seems silly, but I just really felt like he was giving me a perk.
Yeah.
I mean, he did so many things during that whole time. I mean, one time I remember I was really having a tough time, and your dad was savvy enough that he had tools out of the garage, and he was trying to fix his oxygen concentrator. And when his oxygen would go off and not give him the oxygen he needed, he would be insane. He would do all kinds of weird things because, you don't have enough oxygen. Sure. But he was really trying to fix this with his tools. And I was so frustrated. And out of the blue, we get company from some people that hadn't visited in a while. They distracted him. I was able to get an oxygen turned back on, and then he was back to normal. But I mean, it was like all these coincidences that, looking back, the Lord orchestrated to help me not lose my mind, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like it's as cheesy and awful as it sounds. It's that footprints in the sand.
Yeah.
People that don't believe in God and don't have a relationship with God often go out of their way to cite the atrocities instead of the fact that we managed to get through the atrocities and still be good.
And the blessing
that is God.
I knew where my husband was going when he died. It's not like I'll never see him again. I mean, I won't see him in this lifetime, but it's not like I'll never see him again. And that was such a comfort. I don't know how people can deal with the loss of loved ones and they're not saved, and you don't know if you're going to see him again. That's the worst part. That's it, and it's over. But I knew the Lord was very good about reminding me of his mercy and his plan for us. And, and like he said, the cancer was not happening to me. It was happening to him. My job was to help him usher out of this world with much dignity and as less pain as possible. And his death was amazing. I mean, it was awful, of course, but it was one of the most, I don't know.
Tell us about that.
Well, he had gotten he'd gotten to the point that he had to have what's called a non-rebreather, which is kind of like a high flow oxygen system to give him enough oxygen so he could, manage. And they knew it would maybe they thought maybe he'd have like a week left. They weren't sure. But I remember he was sitting on the edge of the bed and he said, my mom's around the corner and she told me I don't need to wear my mask anymore because he hated wearing that mask. And I said, what? He said, my mom's around the corner and she says I don't need to wear my mask anymore. And I says, well, I'm your wife. I'm right here. And I say you do. So keep your mask on, And I'm thinking, man, he's having hallucinations. But, years later, I worked hospice. And a lot of times when you're close to the end, people do see loved ones. I think the Lord allows them to come and help.
And especially mom. I heard that the other day. I was watching a hospice doctor said the number one thing said the last word, the number one last word of the people that have died in his care was mom.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, this was like on a Monday. And so by Wednesday, he'd gotten pretty sick. And it was just funny because our pastor happened to show up that day. His favorite hospice volunteer that never come in on his day off popped in. And his biggest fear was, I don't want to be there when he dies. I don't want to be there when he dies. I just love him so much because he was such a nice man. And then Bob, my daughter's father-in-law, was there. So these people just sort of showed up out of the blue, and our hospice nurse happened to be there. So all these people for support. And my husband's in his bedroom, and he says, "Okay, I'm done," and he ripped his mask off. And I thought, "Oh Lord, is he committing suicide?" And the Lord told me, "No, he would have been dead a long time ago if it wasn't for artificial support. He's fine. It's his choice." The Lord said that to me plainly.
Wow.
And so my husband was going through these throes of death. He was physically able to get around. So he would be down on his knees praying, and I was praying with him. Then he would stand up, and the whole time he was breathing really hard. And you could see his chest pounding because his heart was trying so hard to keep the oxygen going. And he was praying, and he'd say, "Oh, help me here, and Lord, help me, Lord." And then I remember the last thing he actually said to me is he accidentally stepped on my foot, and he said, "Oh, sorry, honey, be careful." He said that. So I'm thinking, oh, he's thinking of me when he's dying. It was so sweet. And he was praying, and then up and then down, crying on his knees and then up. I mean, he was quite battling. And I remember thinking, it's like a warrior or like maybe an Olympian athlete that's prepared so long for this journey. And now he's right in the middle of the game. He's right here. Anyway, so I remember he ended up getting down on his knees between the bed and the dresser. And I said, "Oh no, honey, don't die there. They'll never be able to get you out," because he was big. So I linked my arms under his arms and pulled him up and put him on the bed. I know, pulled him on the bed, and I put a blanket on him, and I had a shared near-death experience with him. He said, "Oh, Gail's Addition." And in my mind, I saw where we were back in Gail's Addition in his home neighborhood. And I seen it as plain as day. And I said, "Oh no, honey, don't stop there. Keep going on to your reward." And in that instant, I felt this whoosh, out the window because the window was right above me. I could tell his spirit had left, and he had a little smile on his face. And I thought, oh, I said, "Well, don't worry, honey. Me and the kids will be fine. We'll get the insurance, and we'll be fine. The insurance money will help us." And I thought, oh, that probably sounds horrible to my pastor, but his biggest concern was
I love how practical.
Yeah.
I love how practical you are. You're like, okay, let's make sure you die in the right place. And by the way, don't worry about where your spirit's going there. Let's go on to the next side. We've got insurance coming. Things are good. Yeah. So practical.
But, it was like, I could tell when his spirit left because it was like you could feel him there, and then that was just a shell of a body that quick. But I know where he went, so I'm not worried about that. He loved the Lord. But it was such a great experience. It was, I did, as a nurse, I did work on labor and delivery. That's where you're bringing people into the world. And I worked hospice, which is almost exactly the same, only people are leaving. It's just been, and because of working with your dad during that hospice time, that's when I started really thinking, maybe I want to be a nurse. So his death pushed me into that. And then when I worked at Forks, at the hospital out there, they needed people to do hospice, and a lot of people didn't really like it. And I thought, I'll do that. I don't mind doing hospice. So I worked hospice for about 5 years at the hospital. It was like all these things that look like they're horrible to go through. If you just allow the Lord to guide you, these horrible things can turn into something really good later in your life, you know.
Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was an honor to help him leave. One
Yeah.
of my biggest honors, you know.
That's amazing. And you get to take that, and you've gotten to take that with you. All these experiences that you've had with your own struggles, with your mental health, with, being a bit of a death doula, which is what they call it now, because you have the doulas that are the partners for
Oh,
birth.
yeah.
They
That's right.
call
Yeah.
them death doulas, and it's actually a new field that people are going into, to be there to help people go to the next thing, just like giving birth.
Yeah.
But where are you? Tell us a little bit about your life now. How old are you now? Are you 67? Your birthday's in like a week.
I'll be 69 on my
You'll be
birthday.
69 years old.
Yeah.
So it's been all 30 years since he died.
Yeah,
Is
it's
that
been
right?
a while.
No.
Well, during that time,
20
this
years.
is another crazy story. During
20
that
years.
time on the internet, I used to browse the internet, and I remember I'd had a fight with your dad. This was before he was sick. And I was still wanting to fight, but I knew he had to go to sleep to go to work. So I thought, well, I'm just going to go online and go into some chat room and find some religious chat room or some political chat room. And I'm going to fight with somebody till I don't feel angry anymore. And so I was online, and I seen this guy's name that said opiate. So I sent a smart aleck remark to him. Well, what are you, some kind of a druggie? And he sends me back, no, it's a song from a band called Tool. And so I kind of started flipping him crap, and he was flipping it back. And come to find out, he was from New Zealand. And I thought, I said, I have some friends from New Zealand from high school. What part are you from? And we kind of became a little bit of friends. But then a couple of months later, I found him in a game that I was playing. This was like back in the 80s. And we kind of stayed friends. And then when my husband died, he would pop in once in a while on the email and say, how are you? How are you doing? And my mom's sending her love. We're praying for you and all this. And we kind of stayed friends off and on. And I started using him like Dear Abby, pouring my heart out to him. And I thought, well, if it gets weird, I'll just delete him, And
He
so
lives in
all
New
through
Zealand.
school,
It's fine. Just get a new screen name. No
I'll
one will
never meet
know.
the guy. Who cares? And so we stayed friends. Like for 12 years, I was a widow, and I was not dating, never went out with anybody, but I stayed friends with him, like correspondence. Well, oddly, I remember when I was in Forks, he goes, gee, you're a nice lady. How come you never remarried? Maybe you ought to like join a gun club or something. You'll meet somebody. It's like, I'm not going to join a gun club. And, and so it was kind of funny. And our relationship kind of took a turn. And I thought, I wonder if he's kind of sweet on me. And so as things went on, we kind of became a couple, and he wanted me to come down to New Zealand and meet him. And I thought, what if he's really a weirdo? All these years I wouldn't know. Maybe he's, some kind of somebody I go down there and I'll never come back. But he said, no, it's all above board. You come down here and meet me, and you stay with my mom. So I ended up years later going down to New Zealand to meet his mom, and we fell in love. And now he and I are married, and he lives here with me on the reservation at Navajo. But 12 years
3.
after.
Isn't that wild?
Oh, I know. And he's so much fun to be married to. And he loves the Lord. Very strong Christian, very a good leader in my spiritual walk as far as that goes. But and that was kind of a struggle to get married to him, because everybody was worried that I was going to be marrying this complete stranger. But really, by the time we got married, I'd known him almost 20 years. I mean, really.
He's also like 24 years younger than you, Mom.
Oh, I know. Well, that was another obstacle.
I have to ask a question. So this was the guy that went by the name Opiate?
Yeah.
Does he still like Tool?
Yeah, he does. We just went to see Tool in Phoenix about last summer. Yeah.
Are you kidding me right now? Now I'm envious, because I'm a huge Tool fan.
Oh, yeah. We went down there. It was great. It was at a place called The Footprint in Phoenix.
Wow.
Yeah. It was just like listening to an album. I mean, they were so meticulous. It was great. Yeah.
Well, the lead singer Maynard, he makes like pasta. Did you know that he makes like whole grain pasta, and he grows it himself on his own massive farm? And it's like some of the most healthiest pasta in the world.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah. So there you go. There's some news for you.
Yeah. They put on a spectacular show. Yeah. We really had fun.
How long have you and Paul been married now?
It'll be 9 years in November.
9 years. Wow.
Yeah. I know. And it was like my whole family. I mean, sadly to say, he is younger than some of my kids. So it's like, it was a little awkward. But I mean, he says, well, I'm chronically ill. So I guess physically we're about the same age. He's just like, but yeah, it was just crazy. I mean, but when we met, it was like I'd known him forever. Our personalities, I mean, because we discussed everything online, like political things, religious things, current events, family affairs, how to invest money, all kinds of stuff. Just talked about all kinds of things. And so when we met, it was like we already knew each other. Just pick up the conversation and keep going. We knew what each other liked, movies, music. It was just,
Well, and it's things though, those are the things that you couldn't explain, when you've had this friendship with somebody and you've got all these logged all these hours, from our perspective, from the kids, we were like, mom's manic again.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the funny thing
some
is
random kid from New Zealand.
Paul told me that 8 years before we got married, that the Lord had told him that he was going to marry me. And he said, that is creepy. No way. She's old enough to be my mother. And so when he told me that story, I said, creepy? What do you mean creepy? And it's like, well, and so then I think about, I guess it is a little creepy, but it's worked out.
Well, it sounds to me like it runs in the family, because Tiziana's husband is also a youngin'.
I know. Which means like when it came around to me, because it's so funny, because I love Paul now. And I think I told him after you guys had been married for like a year, I said, I've never been so pleased to admit I was wrong in my whole life.
Yeah.
I've never been so happy to be wrong in my whole life, because I mean, we were like, he just wants a green card and he's just this or that. And of course our, or whatever, like, and our stepdad
to escape the beautiful land of New Zealand to come to this hideous place. Yeah.
Well, yeah, for sure. Well, we didn't, but, and I remember like, and I didn't know him. And I think the first time I met him was at the wedding, and, he's from New Zealand. And I remember as a wedding present, I bought the movie Coming to America on DVD. And we were standing in your kitchen and everybody like getting ready. And I'm there because I'm going to take Paul and his mom to the house, because you're at the house getting ready. He's going to, see you as he walks down the aisle or whatever. And I was like, I got a gift for you, like a wedding present. And his face was like, oh, like very serious. And I kept my face really serious. I was like, I know it's going to be really challenging. I can't imagine what it's like, navigating a new culture, and you're getting married and you're moving here and it's all this stuff. So I thought it might be helpful to get you a gift it's a movie, but it was written about a man who went through something similar, and I think it might be a good support system for you during this time. And I remember I handed him the movie and he opened it up and he didn't miss a beat. And he was like, I can absolutely see how Eddie Murphy's personal experience as a Black African man coming to America would make a lot of sense for me, because he's a white man. He was just like, this is a great, there's so many gems can be mined from this experience. Support me, thank you, and then we just like laughed. Then we laughed, but it was a really nice way for me to be like, okay, maybe he's not a weirdo. Maybe it'll be fun, and he's been a great partner because he is, horrible to say. I just like, he has been a great partner because he is chronically ill. But, your job has taken you to some of the farthest reaches. Oh, yeah.
He's encouraged me so much.
And he's totally happy.
Yeah. Like
wherever you go, he's happy to go.
Was a big move, to give up the job I had, move out of my house, move onto a reservation that's so remote. I mean, the closest store is like 45 miles away. I mean, it's just 45 minutes, and just to take that at my age, then I'm getting close to retirement. And now I'm in a job. I love my job so much. I'm away for a week. I want to get back to work. It's that kind of a job, Wow. And then I decided I wanted to go back to school and get my, it's called a mental health nurse practitioner certificate. And so I'd be a psychiatrist. So you work with the chemicals of someone's brain, basically. And I was hemming and hawing, and he finally said, oh, for crying out loud, honey, just sign up for a class. Just sign up. Take some classes. And so now here I am in a program, and he's just been encouraging him everything. I mean, just anything I want to do, he's behind me. He's a great guy.
Can I ask what Navajo Nation are you on? Like what reservation? I mean,
Oh, I'm in Fort Defiance. So it's the
Fort Defiance,
northeast corner of Arizona. So right
of
across,
Arizona.
like when I come out of my driveway and I get to the stoplight, I'm in New Mexico. Then I cross through the stoplight intersection. I'm back in Arizona. But then when I go to Walmart, 45 minutes later, I'm back in New Mexico. So we're right on
Wow.
the New Mexico Arizona border. Halfway between Flagstaff and Albuquerque is where I'm at.
So I know a missionary that goes around to the different reservations. It's the Native American Ministry Native American Mission Board or Mission Fund, or who they are. Gary Locklear. He was just in Arizona on a reservation and had a heart attack, and they just brought him home. This just happened like literally 2 weeks ago.
Oh,
So I was
wow.
just really curious. I don't think he was at Fort Defiance though. I'll have to find out where he was. He was on a reservation for Navajos though, but I'm sure there's
Oh yeah, there's
many.
like there's a lot of places. It's like
Mhm.
largest. I think it's the largest reservation in the United States as far as
Yeah.
land mass.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, this is a whole nother story. When I was up one night, the place where I was working was having some financial issues, and I was worried that maybe I would come to work one day and there'd be yellow tape around the door. So I started kind of looking, and it was right before Thanksgiving in 2019, and no, 2018 it was, and I ended up being late, couldn't sleep one night, just couldn't get to sleep. So I got online and I just kind of started looking at different job sites, and I seen Fort Defiance. And so I just put together my resume and kind of shipped it off and didn't think anything about it. Well, 2 days later they called. It's like, oh my gosh. So they said, can you come up for a site visit? And I said, well, I have not put in my resignation, so I'd like to come, but I don't want anyone to know. Can we come, maybe over the Thanksgiving holiday? So I went up there over Thanksgiving. My husband came with me. They had a hospitality house that we were going to be staying at. We drove up the freeway. We turned at Lupton that comes onto the reservation. As soon as we crossed the border onto the reservation, I started bawling my head off, bawling like a baby. And my husband's like, what's the matter, honey? What's the matter? And I said, I think I'm supposed to work here. I think the Lord wants me to work here. I really think that. He goes, well, let's do the site visit first. Don't do anything rash, but I just
Hmm.
do it. And when I came in for the interview, my boss, who was my boss for 5 years, and the recruiter that was another lady, so nice. I mean, it's like we just gelled our personalities. The job site was exactly what I wanted to do. The population I would be working with. I mean, it just was amazing. And so I ended up I started in March of 2019. So it was just amazing to come up here. I mean, it's been a real, real blessing. But I know the Lord brought us up here. So,
Wow. So you were there in time for COVID.
oh
Yeah.
yeah, we were here. I remember that Valentine's Day, we went to see Chris Angel. He brought his show up to our area, and I was so excited to go see him. He's like my favorite magician ever. And we came back, and the next weekend we were shut down on COVID, and we're talking lockdown. You couldn't leave the
Yeah.
reservation without going through a police guard. You had to, and
Wow.
we were, of course, white, so we can't use the facilities here to get medication. And my husband has to have his medication, so we had to get this big permission to leave the reservation, go into Gallup, get his medication, and have to get permission to get back into the reservation. I mean, you only had so much time. If you missed that window to get in and out and they thought you were dilly-dallying, so you
Yeah.
couldn't leave. But yeah, that was probably one of the most horrific things I've ever been through. We lost so many people. It was just, I don't even know why their immune system, they just didn't do well with this disease. But it was probably the worst thing I've ever lived through, the pandemic that hit our nation up here, the Navajo Nation. Yeah, they lost per capita the most people of any group in the United States.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
So,
So not only see again, like I think about just from hearing your story and how you felt when you were driving in, how it just emotionally you knew that you needed to be there, and then you're telling me that you were there to go through all of that. It just all of this feels like providential to me. Like,
oh
do
yeah,
you understand what I mean?
of course,
You were
yeah.
there for the reason that you needed to be.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
Wow.
yep. God was so guiding me, and a lot of the experiences that I had previous in my practice have been very, very helpful up here. When I worked for a company in Arizona, down in the Casa Grande and Apache Junction, I did street ministry, not ministry, but we'd have women's clinics, and they'd gather people from the street that were either mental health or homeless or drug addicts. And we'd do women's health care, breast exams, get them mammograms, STD screenings and all of that. And, you learn to love these people. They are in circumstances that anybody could be in their shoes. Under the right circumstances, anybody will do anything. You might think you won't, but you would. And so your heart is to just be of service without trying to be judgmental. And the Lord loves them just as much as he loves you. Every single person is precious to him. And so a lot of that background that I had helping people kind of came with me onto the reservation, that everybody is important, even if they have alcohol problems or, because there's most abject poverty up here. No electricity, no water. Maybe people have never had it. And then if you don't have enough wood for the winter, you can freeze to death. It's a very stark situation in a lot of ways. And the Lord has been really good and instrumental in urging me to do things like ask this patient if they have enough wood for the winter. And if they don't, you can get a hold of their chapter house, which is kind of like their governmental seat in their area, and say, hey, so-and-so is going to be out of wood. Could you check on them? Just a lot of things, how the Lord's guided me as I've been working here, and just through the years developing a relationship with Jesus, about making sure I can hear his voice and follow his lead and use him as my guide to help other people. That's the main thing. That's the best thing when you're helping other people,
Yeah.
Wow, that's
Mom,
precious.
this has been a fantastic conversation. I know you got to get going because you got some other stuff that you've got to do. So Rick and I will probably hang out and chat a little bit longer, but this has just been absolutely wonderful. I'm just so honored that you agreed to share your story with all of our listeners, because it's a really powerful story. And I just love you, and I'm just honored to be your daughter.
I love you too, sweetheart. I love you too.
I love you.
Man,
Have safe travels
it was
today,
so
and we'll
nice
talk
to meet you,
soon.
Mrs. Haines. Wow, what a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing.
Tell
Thanks
Paula
for
I said
having me.
Bye, Mom.
Bye.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
That's your mom.
That's my mom, and it's like my phone just dinged. I thought I had it off. Apparently I didn't. But yeah, that's my mom. And I'm listening to her talk, and she's telling, every time she tells the story of when the day my stepdad died, I've heard it 1,000 times, but I'm sitting here trying to be professional in an interview, and I'm bawling. I'm leaning my face away from the microphone to wipe my eyes so people don't, you know what I mean? I was there for all of it. I was there for all of it. And as a child, there were so many aspects of my childhood that were so sad and so lonely. And it's incredibly healing. And that's to have that relationship with God, and me have that relationship with God, and come to each other with that mutual understanding of God and the way God works, and have been able to just totally repair with each other, Yeah. So, George is the youngest, then Mary Rose, then Glenn, then me. And then my sister Cassie, my sister Brooke, my brother Charles, my brother Victor, and my brother Dennis. That's 9. Yeah. 5 of those are stepped. My mom used to say, she talked about us like we were cookies. She'd say I have five homemade. One. She said I have 3 homemade, 5 that were inherited, and 1 store bought, because my brother Victor's adopted. So my biological parents. My mother had 3 children biologically, and my one sister and I have the same dad. And then I have the half brother, which was the boy she had when she was a kid. And then I have an adopted brother from that family system, that family unit. And they adopted him before I was born. So he's been my brother my whole life. There's no separation there. I don't know any different. And then there were 5 siblings when my mom married my stepdad. 2 of them were older and 3 of them were younger. But my little brother, well, it's so hard because we're all spread out. But my little brother Glenn, is the one when I was talking about Helene and my little brother that lives in Tennessee was down here doing work and had gotten that gift box from the church and with the little card in it. And me and my brother were just bawling our eyes out reading this church card that some third grader had written, like, thank you for all the work you're doing to clean up our area. That's, my little brother, Glenn, that's my stepbrother. He found his mother dead of heroin overdose when he was 4 years old. Yeah. And then my mom became his mom, I mean, it's just, but it's one of those things people talk, I hear that's a common conversation. If God exists, then why'd all these bad things happen? And I'm like, no. The bad things happen. The fact that you can be okay is how you know God exists. That you can recover, that you can heal, that it's possible to overcome, to come back from some of the stuff that my mom's gone through. It's incredible that she's not just like totally off the rails. I mean, unbelievable, but she's not. She's living her life. She's living her best life. She's on chapter 3 of her life. It's the third installment, and she's doing good. So, but anyway, that is that, folks. If you are interested in watching the video for this, it is over there on my Patreon. Notes from the Other Side, nftos.net is where you can go for more information on that Patreon. And yeah, we appreciate it. Send us any thoughts, concerns, or requests. And we will see you guys next time on Notes from the Other Side. Take it easy. Folks, if you're enjoying this episode, you might really enjoy some of the benefits that come with being a Patreon subscriber. Over at patreon.com, we have different levels of membership, and starting for as low as $2 a month, you'll get access to things like all of the notes that I use to make these episodes, bits of script that didn't make it into the show, and even bibliographies about the books that I read to get where I'm going. Through Patreon, you even have access to some of the video that we take for the show. So some of those interviews that you like so well, you'll get to watch them in real time. So once again, head over to patreon.com/NFTOS, as in Notes from the Other Side. That's patreon.com/NFTOS for more information about becoming a Patreon subscriber to this show. Thanks, guys. Catch you later.